What'd you make of Kash Patel, the FBI director, is coming under some
You could tell by my reaction when you started that question, I'm disgusted by it. You don't announce we have a suspect, a person of interest in custody until you're sure that's the guy. And to announce it and then take it back is humiliating. It undermines him. This guy's a pretender. He's not a legitimate law enforcement agent. Can I offer a word of advice to people in public life, media figures? If you knew the person and want to post a remembrance, please do. If you are a public office holder of some relevance, fine, you've been elected to represent us. Everyone else can shut up.
Elie Honig is a former federal and state prosecutor. He's a senior legal analyst for CNN, columnist for New York Magazine, best-selling author. He's, in my humble opinion, one of the best legal analysts in the game, certainly the man that I would call if I ever found myself on the wrong side of the law. His new book, When You Come at the King, Inside DOJ's Pursuit of the President from Nixon to Trump, is out September 16th. Elie Honig, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I will represent you pro bono. I promise you.
Really? You would do that for me?
Small or large case, whatever you might do, I'm here for you.
Don't write checks you can't cash, Elie. Let's start with the book.
Yeah.
When You Come at the King. We have it here. It's fascinating. I really enjoyed reading it. For people that don't know the premise, could you give us a sort of broad look at what the book is about and how you came up with the idea to write it?
So I will tell you openly, I modeled the structure of this book on George Stephanopoulos' book about the Situation Room, because I read it, it's great. And
also a brilliant book.
Yeah, and what I loved about it is the structure made so much sense. He takes this important governmental institution, the White House Situation Room, and takes us through all these major chapters of history, from Cuban Missile Crisis, Bay of Pigs, on through, up till COVID. And I thought, ooh, that would work really well if I take a look at all the big special counsel, they've been called different things, special counsel, independent prosecutor cases from really Watergate on. And so basically what I have in this book is a chapter or more on each of the Watergate, Iran-Contra, Clinton and Ken Starr, all the way up through Jack Smith, with inside reporting on all of it. And I will tell you, it's my third book, and this was the most fun to put together, just because I spoke to so many people who live this stuff. So it's much more of a reported book. It's much more of an insider book, and it was a blast. It came together beautifully.
How did you come up with the title? Because the title is fantastic.
Yeah. So I don't know how other people do it. I don't think I've had the title for any of my 3 books when I started. Definitely did not have this title. I was thinking of something justice-y, like one of those Jim Comey books, higher, loyal, justice, whatever. But Eric Nelson, who's my editor at HarperCollins, doesn't like bland titles. And this one came,
smart man.
Right. This is an homage, a quote, or a paraphrase from Omar from The Wire. If you watch The Wire, and he famously says, "You come at the king, you best not miss." That is actually a sentiment that goes back to Machiavelli and Emerson and others. But I love that because, first of all, it's a nice show about the high stakes of these cases. I mean, I talked to these prosecutors, defense lawyers, people who were prosecuted, White House officials, and they all basically said this was essentially life or death for us. And they all understand that whatever they do here is going to be in their obituary. So, I did normal trials and it felt like the end of the world. But when you have the whole world looking at you, it's that much more intense. The other thing is the retribution angle, right? When you come at the king, you best not miss. It's about retribution, essentially. And now what we're seeing, especially with Trump 2.0, he has made clear how's he using DOJ? He's going after people who he believes wronged him, and he's using prosecutorial power to do that.
Yeah. You obviously have an enormous amount of legal experience. You're a prosecutor, you've been a legal analyst for many years now. This is a deeply reported book. I mean, you interviewed a lot of people. You got a lot of people to speak on the record that wouldn't normally talk publicly about these kind of things. What was the process for you reporting out this book? Did you learn how to be a reporter, or is it a very similar skill to ones that you've used throughout your career?
I think both of those things. It is similar to digging into a criminal case and investigating. The difference is I don't have subpoena power now, which I wish I did.
If they gave journalists subpoena power, it would be the Daily Mail would be a very powerful operation.
So you have to learn different methods. And I will say I learned from a lot of my colleagues and talked to my colleagues at CNN about how do you do this. My initial intent was...
Sorry, just to interrupt you. Who gave you the best advice?
I'll give you an example. Kate Baldwin told me, if you have multiple people involved in a transaction or meeting, which you always will, and you get one piece of information from one of them, let other people know that, well, I already know this happened. A, that'll ease them up, and B, that might incentivize them, right? So I remember Kate giving me that bit of advice back when I started. And so some of these, my initial intent was, I'm going to add a little flavor with the firsthand stuff. But I never thought it would develop. I have 36 or 7 people on record by name. Like, no, I didn't do anonymous. I had some people wanted to go anonymous, and I said no.
What was the thinking there?
Again, I don't remember which colleague, but somebody at CNN or maybe multiple people basically said it's not fair to have some people on record and other people responding anonymously, right? And so I basically said to people, I'll take you with your name or I won't take you at all. And most of those people gave me their name. A couple of people said, well, then I'm out. Yeah. But fine, I'd rather not have anonymous. And nothing wrong with anonymous. I just didn't want it in this book. But it just sort of, there's some people I know. I know Andy McCabe personally from the FBI. He's in here. I know Carl Bernstein from CNN. He's in. Other people I sort of went through, folks at CNN. Other people I just blind called or I didn't call, but email or texted and got a lot of yeses. I'll tell you one fun story. Judy Miller is in this book. Judy Miller was a famous New York Times reporter who went to prison for almost 3 months because she wouldn't give up her source in one of these cases. And I can't say who, but an anchor at CNN said, she's really tough to get. And she's not warm and fuzzy, but good luck. And I emailed her, and this is so self-aggrandizing, but it's true. And she responded, said, I know who you are. I watch you on CNN. You're a straight shooter. I'll talk. And she gave me 3 hours of fantastic stuff that's in here, including what it's like in prison for her.
So, wow.
What it was like. She's out now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But so the key to good reporting is to just be beloved widely by an audience.
Well, honestly, I do think, I'll give you another example. Like Rod Rosenstein is here. Now, he was very important in the Mueller case. Has been on TV a couple times. I didn't know him. And I just found his law firm address and he had a similar response. Like, I think people are more likely to speak with you if they think you're going to give them a fair shake. And I think in this book, people were trying to, in a way, speak to history.
Right.
Some of these histories have been told, Watergate and Clinton in particular, but not recently and not in an updated way. And I have new stuff in there. And especially the more recent cases, Mueller, Durham, Robert Hur, Jack Smith, all those people, not everyone was willing to go on the record, but this may be the only definitive account written of those cases.
Yeah, and I think if you're a player in those cases, like Rod Rosenstein, correct me if I'm wrong, not a big public speaker about his cases at all.
No, not at all.
But the incentive for him is, this is the book that's going to be written about these cases.
Yeah.
For posterity, you want your side shown in them, I would imagine, was your pitch for that.
For sure. I rarely even had to say that.
Yeah.
I think people understood. But you also have to take that into account as the writer and as the reader. Like, everyone has a self-interest here. Although I will say some of my favorite moments are when people owned up to things. Like, I'll give you one example. There was a long simmering dispute between the Clinton team, and I talked to Bill Clinton's lawyers and a White House lawyer from back then, and Ken Starr's team about who was leaking, right? And they both accused each other of, it's not really leaking if defense lawyers do it technically, but and I asked the lawyer who I spoke to from Starr's team, he was essentially the number 2 guy, I said, I got to just ask you straight up, did your team leak? And I was expecting the old no, or they did. He goes, oh, hell yeah, we did. He goes, and it made me nuts because it was, I hated it. It was bad for us. And so, it's cool when you see an admission like that.
And that's the first time, and that's a major point of contention.
Yeah.
And that's the first time that's ever been revealed.
I think so. Yeah, I believe so. There's also another point where I'm pressing him on how much sexual detail they included in the infamous Starr report.
Again, very big deal at the time.
Very big deal at the time, and he admitted that some of it went too far, which is, I think, the first time that anyone's, certainly Ken Starr, he passed away a few years ago, but Ken Starr never gave an inch there, so.
Did he specify what exactly crossed the line, or you didn't get that graphic?
I did. Okay, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So, the back and forth was, of course, Clinton's people said this was crazy and it was salacious, it was intended to hurt him. And of course, I knew that Starr's team was going to respond by saying, well, it was a perjury case, so who touched who, where, was relevant to the definition of perjury. There was twice in the Starr report, Starr's team writes that after Clinton had his encounters with Monica, I'll just say he masturbated into the sink of the Oval Office. That's in the report. And so I asked Saul Weisenberg, the prosecutor, I said, but how would that have been relevant to perjury?
Right, surely not.
He goes, yeah, probably not that. It's in the book, yeah.
Now, I can't fathom the argument that you could make that would be pertinent.
I was eager to hear what he would say,
I know,
but he just owned up.
You could get a little creative with it. I don't want to speculate myself on that, but
let's not.
Yeah, just in terms of the work itself, allow me to get a little Paris review on you. What's your writing process? Are you sat down solemnly at a computer, no distractions, just chugging away at this? How do you?
No. So this is my 3rd book now. One of my rules, I work quickly, especially if I'm super engaged in this, right? And one of my rules, I like to get it on the page and then edit, craft, right, move. I mean, one of the luxuries of this that we don't have on live TV is you can go back and fix things here, right? And, up to a certain point. So I'm a relentless editor of myself. And the other thing is, early on, I had a rule. I had to write 500 words a day, no matter what. If it was a Sunday and I wanted to watch football all day, I would take halftime of a game, and knock out 500 words. Now, maybe none of them would make it into the book, maybe 480 of them, but it's intimidating, right? You're looking at a blank screen, you have I think this is 100,000 words, but honestly, this one, it's not easy. I don't want to say easy, but this one flowed very naturally.
Yeah. Robert Caro has that. He has a calendar where he writes, 500 pages, 200 pages on each day.
Right.
And he'll still look back, 30 years later and be like, damn, I only hit 200 words that day.
I'm no Robert Caro.
Now, in the book, you lay out the history of independent investigations in 3 phases.
Yeah.
What are those eras, and why did you choose to do it like that?
So there's what I call the Wild West era, but before we had any rules. And people don't maybe realize this. There were no rules when Watergate happened. They were just making this up as they went along. Archibald Cox, who was the famous independent prosecutor, they just chose him. They basically understood intuitively, we need an outsider, and they brought him in. After and because of Watergate, everyone, both sides, basically agreed, we need a law now. And so they passed the Independent Counsel Act. That goes from the late 70s up to 99. The most famous one was Bill Clinton, Ken Starr, but there were 20 in all. So including some interesting ones that I have in here. I have a guy, Mike Espy, who was a cabinet secretary who got prosecuted and acquitted. And he talks to me about how that case destroyed his life, even though he was acquitted. And then we have the modern special counsel regulations, which were written in 99. The law lapsed. Both sides, Republicans and Democrats, agreed it needs to go. It died. And then DOJ itself wrote its own regulations, which have been on the books since 99. I actually argue, every 25 years or so, we sort of, we clean it up a little, and I think it's time for that again.
What do you think needs to be done to fix the process?
So, well, the big thing is, look, Trump's not going to use this, right? Let's be real. If anything, maybe to go after his opponents, but not in the traditional sense. And every president up to Trump they don't like it, but they've abided. Even Nixon, he fired everyone in the Saturday Night Massacre, but he left the team in place. Even Trump won, right? He let Mueller, he obstructed, but he let Mueller stay in place. He didn't fire everybody.
This term, I can't even fathom.
Totally different. Happening. Well, I say in the book, it's a miracle when you look back and even consider that Mueller was appointed and it lasted. But I do argue that whoever comes next in the Oval Office needs to restore this, needs to allow DOJ to restore it. And I have a bunch of policy proposals in there. The gist of it is we need a semi-permanent special counsel who serves a set term of years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, like the FBI director, who can go across presidential administrations. You have to vet his people for political bias. He needs stronger protection against being fired, sort of a whole set of regs that I think builds on what we have. What we have now is pretty good, but I think there's things we can tweak.
What surprised you the most when you were reporting out this book? What's the one story or detail that really blew your mind?
So, that's a good one. Well, beyond the Clinton things that I told you, Bob Bauer is Joe Biden's lawyer, right? Just represented, maybe to this day represents him, but represented him on the whole Robert Hur case. And I talk in the book about this is the classified documents case. When Robert Hur's report came out saying, he's an elderly man with a faulty memory, politicians went crazy on him. I quote Adam Schiff and all these Democrats saying Hur is a political hitman. And I asked
If anything, he was generous.
Well, so I asked Bob Bauer, the lawyer for Biden, and I was expecting him to pile on.
Right.
And what Bob Bauer said to me, I'm paraphrasing, but the quote's in the book, he said, I very much take issue with the fact that Robert Hur wrote what he wrote in his report. And I completely object to that, and I think he got things wrong in his report. However, I do not think he did it because of political motivations. Contrary to what a lot of Democratic politicians, I don't think he's a political partisan. I don't think he was trying to hurt Biden or help Trump. He said, and I thought this was a really sharp observation, he said, because of the system, the pressures that get put on a special counsel, where if you're not going to indict, you feel pressure to show something, to produce, and hence this 300+ page report that Bauer took issue with. But I thought that was an interesting, I don't even know if I would say concession, but almost a more informed viewpoint than you hear from politicians.
Right.
Yeah.
And which is a similar dynamic, I think, that we saw in the James Comey Hillary Clinton case, right, in 2016.
Yeah.
Where there was sort of pressure to have this announcement
right.
without actually bringing any charges.
So I use that case as the example of why we need rules, because Comey did that outside the rules, right? I mean, there was no special counsel. He just made that up as he went along, and he completely Comey comes in for quite a bit of criticism in this book for that case and a few other things. He declined to talk to me. We know how shy Jim Comey is about being in front of it.
God forbid.
Talking to the media. And I mean, but for whatever reason, he chose not to speak with me, which is very much his prerogative.
Do you think he knew that you were going to be tough on him, or
I don't know. I don't know him. It's funny. I started the SDNY months after he left.
Got it.
But I say in the book, when I started there, everyone worshipped the guy. Everyone had photos of. It was funny. It kind of looked like almost a gag photo because Comey's 6'7", and so everyone had their swearing-in photos, and he's 14 inches taller than them, and so I say he was worshipped. And there was a time when he was the best of the best of young. He had been a mob prosecutor, a terrorism prosecutor, but I think starting with the Hillary Clinton debacle that he caused by grabbing power, I think he really undermined his own legacy. And by the way, there's AG, DOJ did a report afterwards where 3 different AGs of both parties say the same thing, basically.
Yeah. I want to ask you about a big news story this week, probably the most shocking news story we've seen in a long time. That's saying something right now. The apparent assassination of Charlie Kirk, who, pro-Trump activist. He was shot and killed at an event in Utah. There's still a lot we don't know about this case, obviously, as we record right now. But I want to get your take on the gunman's escape right now, because take us behind the scenes of how law enforcement responds to something like this and how someone can get away from an event like that after committing such a crime when they're being chased by the might of the U.S. law enforcement.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know. I mean, I guess I do know what it is about this, but this one hits so hard, doesn't it? It's devastating. I mean, I don't care who you are. It's so horrifying what happened, what was done to him, and what was he doing? He was talking in public to people who disagreed. Like that's what the First Amendment is about. Anyway, I said to someone right when this happened, I was in transit. I was in flights the whole time. There's 3 things that you're going to want. And if they need one of them in order to catch this guy: the firearm, a vehicle, and an image of the guy. And so now it looks like they at least have 2 of those, right? So I'm confident that they'll be able to use. There's enough of that they'll be able to get him. But that's how you make your links. I was nervous for a second. I was like, well, if he took the gun with him, one shot, if he scooped the shell, there's going to be no remnant. You can't tell anything from the slug. I mean, that's not going to tell you anything. And if he didn't use a vehicle, or they don't have a vehicle, and they don't have surveillance, but it looks like they at least have 2 of the 3. So let's hope.
Would you make of Kash Patel, the FBI director, is coming under some?
Yeah, I know where you're going. You probably already know my reaction.
Now because he's been live tweeting this like he's us.
He's such an amateur. He's such an amateur.
Yeah. So how he's coming under criticism from Trump supporters now for being like, we've caught him, and then 100%. 5 minutes later, whoops. How abnormal is it for the FBI director to be basically like sitting in a chair with popcorn, commenting on this?
You could tell by my reaction when you started that question. I'm disgusted by it. Like, yes, in a case like this, you have an obligation to inform the world what's happening. But you have to hold your horses. You have to make sure you're buttoned up. You don't announce we have a suspect, a person of interest in custody until you're sure that's the guy. And to announce it and then take it back is humiliating. It undermines him. I mean, I think in a way that he will not. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to get fired or resign, but his credibility, which I think was already fairly questionable, really took a hit. It shows, look, he's over his head. This is why people, I know a million FBI agents, past and present, and even the ones who really like Trump were like, this guy's a pretender. He's not a legitimate law enforcement agent.
Ken Delanian, NBC News, he pointed out that Kash Patel fired the highly regarded head of the FBI field office in Salt Lake City a few weeks ago for reasons that are not clear. I've seen people also point to the fact that there's this 22-year-old former landscaper who is running threat prevention at the FBI. So what do you make of arguments that the weakening of the FBI under this administration could have anything to do with the aftermath of this and how it's handled?
It's tough to draw a direct causal link, like a but-for link, as we would say in the law.
If we had the best FBI of all time, they still might not have caught it.
But there's a cost to this. There's a cost to sacrificing real expertise, whether it's in economic areas or health areas, but in prosecution and law enforcement as well.
Yeah. Let's say police catch the gunman.
Yeah.
What kind of case is this going forward? What can we expect to happen after that?
He will certainly be prosecuted for first-degree murder under Utah law. You have to show aggravating factors in order to get it up to death penalty. I think one of them is if you endangered other people, which I think you can argue firing a shot, bullets can fragment, whatever. So I think you'll see first-degree death-eligible charges in Utah. I think you'll see federal charges. It's going to depend a little bit on whether he crossed the state line, whether he used an interstate means, what the status of the firearm was. Was he legally or illegally in possession of it? Was it doctored? Was it altered? Was the serial number rubbed off? I think they will probably find a federal hook as well. I think this is the rare case where we will see a doubling up of charges. You know, the feds are not really, there's policy at DOJ saying you're not supposed to add on a charge if the state has it. But in a case like this, I think they should and will.
Yeah. Now, there's been some fairly, I guess I could say, deranged commentary coming out in the wake of this, both on cable news and social media. Matthew Dowd got fired by MSNBC.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw what he said. I didn't realize he'd been fired.
He suggested that Kirk's own rhetoric was to blame for his killing. He issued a statement apologizing for that and saying that's not what he intended to say. Every time I open up Twitter, it's major figures.
Yeah.
Everyone from Elon Musk on, who said that the left is the party of murder, posting the most incendiary stuff imaginable. Are you alarmed by the climate right now?
Can I offer a word of advice to people in public life, media figures?
Shut up.
Yes. If you knew the person and want to post a remembrance, please do. If you are a public office holder of some relevance, fine. You've been elected to represent us. Everyone else can shut up, right? Like if you're a legal analyst on CNN, we don't need your opinion on the reasons. You know, I mean, there'll come a time where we will know and be analyzing court cases, but not everyone. Look, I got off of Twitter or X for the most part, except for just posting clips a couple years ago.
Smart man.
It was hard to withdraw. I was once on it, and again, I can't say, but one of our anchors saw me on it and said, "I told you, Twitter will only make you stupid and stressed." And he was right. And
but when you stop using it, you get the shakes.
But then it goes away, and it's beautiful. I will say I was looking at it yesterday because, like, when something breaks like this, I want to know. But then it was just the disgusting videos.
Yesterday, I was like, my feed had just gotten rid of the snuff film of the woman in Charlotte getting stabbed to death.
Right.
And then this happens, and then I get that, and then like people calling for tribunals and public hanging of Bill Gates for, I guess, involvement in this. Like, it's crazy, and I would urge anyone to stop using X because it's poisoning our brains.
So my original advice, you can take a pass, folks. Not everybody needs to hear your thoughts on, you know, I said the same thing, I think, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Like, not every legal analyst has to have an opinion on that.
Right.
Let it go. Let the experts handle it.
Yeah. And I mean that, and also, you know, just the general analysis, expert analysis of, you know, I see people tweeting, "Oh, this is a shot that could only be taken by a trained professional," and then other people saying this is a very easy shot, you could have taken it, and it's like no one knows, really.
Right.
Like,
I mean, we also have, you know, we have to hold our horses, right?
Hold our horses.
Like, don't get out ahead. Yep.
Now, I think it's still safe to say political violence is escalating.
Yes.
Just this summer we had the killing of 2 employees of Israel's D.C. embassy, the June shooting of 2 Minnesota state lawmakers and their families. In August, you had a shooting outside the Centers for Disease Control. How do you think we got here, and do you think we're at a time of fairly unprecedented political violence in America?
I don't know how we got here, and yes, I do think this is, I guess you could point to the 60s, right, with the various assassinations of RFK, JFK, Martin Luther King. It's, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's a reflection of our polarized politics or polarized media. I wish I had good answers, but it's undeniable that we are in, this is more than a blip, this is more than a fluke. I mean, there's others, you know, you can go back farther from what you said, and there's more and more of these. And the way that the Charlie Kirk killing happened was just so brazen and so out in the open and so gruesome that I don't know. I don't know. There was a poll question today. Michael Smerconish has his daily poll, and it was like, will this bring down the temperature in America? And I thought, well, that's going to be a no. And it was 95% said no, unfortunately. I wish it was not the case, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have the right elected leaders for that. Yeah. Now, I mean, to me, it feels like the 1960s plus social media,
right?
Which is
a huge aggravator.
Cocktail.
Yeah.
I saw one prominent MAGA account saying, you know, it's not enough I don't want the National Guard in Democrat cities anymore. I want the Air Force.
Right.
Do you fear that this horrible tragedy might be used as a pretext for government overreach in terms of what we've already seen, an acceleration of what we've already seen in cities?
I think that's a valid concern. I do think, though, again, I'm a believer, and I don't think they're perfect, but I do believe in our guardrails. I mean, the courts have pushed back and rejected some of Donald Trump's emergency declarations, the way he's deployed the Guard, and I've written about this and spoken about it, I think his ability to deploy the military is going to be severely limited from here on out. DC is a different scenario. He's not going to have a national emergency like he had with the riots that he was able to point to in California. So I do have some faith that he will be restricted in that, but I don't doubt that it might motivate him to try to do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he hinted at that in his speech.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right
sure.
after it happened.
Yeah.
You have made that argument, which I find very interesting, that DC and California are very different cases from his attempts, or at least the threat, to send the National Guard into Chicago or New York.
Right.
Lay out that argument for us. Why is that different?
Yeah, so legally, when we're talking about the National Guard, DC, the president controls DC. So that's easy. That's a no-brainer. California, he used this emergency law that says if necessary to enforce federal law. And he was allowed to deploy them by the Court of Appeals, who basically said, look, there is evidence in the record that these protests have at times gotten violent towards federal agents, federal property. Therefore, he's okay under that law. But then what do you do when there is no protest? Chicago doesn't have protests going on right now. New York doesn't have protests. So I think what Trump's going to say is, well, there's crime and the crime's really bad and it's scary and dangerous. But I don't think, and I'm sort of sympathetic by that. I don't have a problem with surging law enforcement resources, but I don't think that's going to be enough to trigger the emergency statute that he's used so far in California.
Right. So he's not going to, for example, be able to use this to send National Guard into New York.
No, I don't think so. I don't think, yeah.
So I feel like a lot of you write a column for New York Magazine and for Cafe Media. It's brilliant. I read every one.
Thank you.
I feel like a lot of it these days falls into a particular genre, which is can Trump do this legally?
That's a good catch-all. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of applications for that, and so I'm not complaining. But I'm curious, you covered the first administration.
Yeah.
What differences do you see between Trump's first term in the sense of what he was doing and how it rubbed up against the limits of the law, and how he's operating now?
So let me answer that with an analogy from the book, actually. In the first term, Mueller was appointed. On Trump's watch, right? His Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, recused. Rod Rosenstein takes over, appoints Mueller. And Trump spends the next 2 years undermining, attacking, demeaning Robert Mueller and his team. But Mueller is permitted to finish his work and put out his 300-page report. Now, in Trump 2.0, forget it, right? Can you imagine if someone at DOJ even mentioned the word special counsel? They'd be immediately fired by Pam Bondi, right? And Trump would be all for it. And then they would probably launch some sort of retribution at that person. And again, it goes sort of to the title of the book, when you come at the king, you better not miss. And even, I've been critical of Letitia James. I've written about, I think her lawsuit was bogus. Most of it just got thrown out the other day. But I think the way that he's now digging through mortgage files, has Bill Pulte, this guy, digging through mortgage files looking for contradictory claims, I think is completely inappropriate, dangerous, and I think it needs to be called out. But I think that's an example of what's changed from 1 to 2. In part 2 now, he cares much less than he ever did about guardrails or norms.
Right, and I think that there's also a key difference where in the first term, the members of the cabinet were all fairly traditional establishment Republicans when he first got into office, and now they're all very, very Trumpy loyalists.
Look at Bill Barr on the one hand, who I criticized in my first book, but he did have his line. He wouldn't cross, right? He would not go along with the election fraud claims, although he did earlier. We forget that. But at the end, he would not go along with the election fraud claims. And there were times when Trump said, I want John Kerry indicted. I want Obama. And Barr would just ignore that, right? Like a parent with a toddler, like, all right, just cry yourself out.
Yeah, I think it was either James Mattis or John Kelly who, when Trump said, oh, let's drone strike Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And they were like, no,
yeah,
we're not going to do that.
We'll just let it peter out.
Yeah, they took the papers off the desk. Gary Cohn famously took the tariff papers off the desk and stopped him from doing it. And now he has people that will.
Well, now he has Pam Bondi.
He has Pam Bondi.
And Kash Patel.
Right.
And then they'll do it, yeah.
Speaking of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, what did you make of the whole handling of the Epstein files? So-called Epstein files, I should say, because...
disastrous in the following. They should have done one of two things. One is, the actual correct answer from Pam Bondi is, we don't turn this stuff over. It's a closed case. If we're going to turn over the Epstein files, then we can turn over the Jack Smith Trump files, the Joe Biden Her files, go back in time. DOJ policy says we don't do that. And so would you and I in the media have said this is outrageous? Of course, but she could have said, sorry folks, it's the rules. If you subpoena it, maybe we'll fight you out in court. So Option one would have just been like, sorry, fall back on the rules, shut it down. Option two would have been actual just turn it off, just disclosure. Just we've put up a link, here it is, you can page through. We took out victims' names. Instead, it's this mishmash of promising the client, she asked about the client list, and then she said, well, I have documents on my desk. Stuff's coming tomorrow, phase one, phase two, but we're not going to get, and then the FBI memo saying nothing more is coming out and there's nothing more to see here, to now everything's slowly dripping out. It couldn't have been more mishandled.
And I think there also is a misperception that the administration is fueled, not only during the campaign when they said we're going to release the Epstein client list.
Yeah.
The public's imagination about this list is that there is a list that the government holds that have all the people that Jeffrey Epstein, all the famous wealthy people that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to.
Right.
When in reality, the Epstein case files they're just case files that prosecutors went through in the Southern District, we're well familiar with, and they prosecuted Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell for trafficking underage victims to them. To Epstein. Yeah. That's it. They prosecuted what was in those files. There's no other criminal.
I mean, there's pretty clearly no list. Everyone who's been part of this case has said that. Why would he? Why would he say, let me write down the names of everyone who's been involved in this horrific crime with me? But yeah, I mean, I guess the interest people have is, well, if we page through those documents, we will see the names of others. That might be in there. I don't know. But, I think any hope that anyone else ever gets prosecuted is zero at this point.
You have been following Trump's case against the Wall Street Journal quite closely.
Yeah.
He sued the Wall Street Journal because they reported on the letter that he had sent Jeffrey Epstein for his birthday. The letter has been released now. We've all seen the drawing and I guess you would call it a poem. How do you see that case progressing? Does it stand a chance?
No, I don't think it does. I never thought it did from the start because, and especially now that we know the letter's real. I mean, not only have we seen the letter, but we know it came from Epstein's estate, which is where it would be if it was given to Jeffrey Epstein.
I've still seen people doubt the signature.
Right.
They say, the tail is different or whatever.
Mean, but the thing is, first of all, handwriting, I said on there that we're all going to get out our magnifying glasses and become handwriting experts now. But here's the thing. If the letter did not exist, that would be a problem for the Wall Street Journal, right? Because they definitely do say it exists. But now it exists. We know that. And that leaves Trump to pick at the margins. It's not my signature, someone else. But if you look at what the Wall Street Journal reported, this is an example where media lawyers, and I'm a lawyer in media, but I'm not a media lawyer, but where they can perform an important function. It was obvious when you read that piece that this thing had been lawyered to an inch of its life, that piece by the Wall Street Journal. And what they say is something like the circumstances around the creation of the letter remain uncertain. They don't say that's his signature. They don't say he wrote the poem or the script or whatever. So I think they're covered because remember, Trump has to show one, that it's false, and two, they knew it was false or they were reckless. I just don't think there's,
not gonna happen.
But here's the thing, what you should be rooting for as the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, if it survives a motion to dismiss, and I think that's iffy that it will. If it does, we're going to get into depositions of Wall Street Journal. I mean, right?
Donald Trump.
Rupert Murdoch, probably. Donald Trump, for sure, under oath. I mean, I've said before, was he thinking about this? He's going to get, not only is he going to get deposed under oath, it's going to be about his relationship to Jeffrey Epstein.
I think he was probably hoping that like ABC and CBS, that he might be able to extract a pound of flesh. Yeah. And certainly Emma Tucker, the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, is never going to agree to a settlement here.
Right.
But Lachlan Murdoch, who now runs News Corp, it might be more inclined to, have a performative payoff.
Yeah.
What I find that the saddest defense of this that I've seen from Trump supporters is when they say this doesn't sound like Donald Trump. Because
I mean, it doesn't.
I mean, if you know Donald Trump in the 1990s and the 2000s, he was a diva.
It's so weird. It's just the exact kind of
strange. But it's the exact kind of thing that he would send to his friend who thinks he's really smart and wants to impress and is a bit mysterious. And I'm like,
so maybe it does.
This is your guys' idol, and you don't truly know him. He likes show tunes. He likes sending.
That's true. It does.
He likes sending poems to his mysterious smart friend who has a place on Park Avenue.
It does have like a wannabe screenwriter, like a wannabe Hallmark movie in a weird.
And what really is Trump at the end of the day? Now, looking at a lot of things that Trump is doing now, and a lot of stuff that you're covering, he is very fond of demonstrating the extent of executive power that he has, and about exerting executive power over domains that previously people would have said are outside of his control or outside of a president's control. Yeah. We obviously know the Supreme Court ruling about executive power. We also live in a media climate now where I think Fox News and a lot of media outlets that people who support Trump follow are very much inclined to defending things that they would not have defended on a previous president.
Right.
All of that is to say, with all that in mind, do you see a pathway for Trump to serve a third term in office?
No, on that. I don't think he's seriously going to try that. I know there's this wrinkle in the Constitution where it says, sometimes I just wish they would have written it better. Like, you cannot be president 3 times, but they said you cannot be elected. So they're like, well, he could run for vice president and then J.D. Vance or whoever can quit.
Or declare some emergency, suspend the election.
Right.
That's a theory that people have.
I don't spend any time worrying about that. I don't think he wants to do it. I don't think he will do it. But I think to your earlier point, I draw a distinction when it comes to Trump's expansive use of executive power between the governmental stuff and the beyond government stuff. So within government, okay, I have the ability to fire executive branch officials regardless of whether Congress tried to limit it. I have the ability to declare emergencies, that kind of thing. I think he is within the realm of fair play and reason to try to explore those, to make those assertions and to fight him out in the courts. And he wins some and loses some. That, I think, is all. I don't begrudge him that. And I've said several times on air that he's going to win this one. Not always, but some of the things that people say, how could he do this? He's allowed, I like it or not. He is the president. The line I would draw is when you get into the interfering with universities, law firms, media companies. That, I think, is, I don't need to sermonize about it, is wrong. But he's also going to lose those cases. Like, he's going to lose every one of these college cases, every one of these he has lost every one of these law firm cases. And so, I applaud those who've stood up to him.
Yeah. I mean, the free speech cases too, when he takes a tough student off the street and detains them over an op-ed they wrote.
Right.
Like, a judge is not going to let that
But let me say, there is a law that says the Secretary of State, if he decides that a person's bad for our international diplomacy, it's pretty broad. So
pretty broad. And I'd imagine it wasn't written about a 28-year-old
I don't think it was meant. I don't think it was meant for a Tufts professor. Exactly. I think it was much more. Yeah. I think they had a higher bar in mind than that.
Yeah. Now, I think cable news analysts take heat for being reflexively partisan. You have a reputation for telling it straight. Do you think there is a tendency of analysts, legal or otherwise, to play to a certain audience and let that cloud their judgment?
There certainly are some people who that's their job, right? Scott Jennings, Van Jones, right? Mm-hmm. Wait, I got that wrong. Scott Jennings on the right, Van on the left. But that's their jobs. They're there to voice what conservatives are saying, what liberals are saying. The way I have always approached this job from the day I started, and by the way, every boss of CNN, from Jeff Zucker on through Mark Thompson and other executives and people I admire, have always said, just do it. You can only call it straight. First of all, if you decide that everything Trump does is legal and fine, or everything he does or everything bad done to him is fine because it's against him, first of all, you're going to do a crappy job as an analyst, right? You can't call it straight. There's no possible way that everything Trump has ever done is all good or all bad, right? And sometimes he's right, and often he's wrong. But if you're not willing to call that out, you're doing a lousy job as an analyst. And more importantly, you're misserving 2 important groups. First of all, the people you're covering. Now, look, we have an obligation to go hard at people in power, but you also have an obligation to be fair to them. And so the other group, even more important, is your audience. If you are telling your audience constantly, he's going to get thrown off the ballot, under the 14th Amendment, right? That was ridiculous.
The walls are closing in.
Yeah. He's going, how many times do people say he's going to prison? He's going to die in prison, nail in the coffin.
From 2016.
Right. And if you are constantly beating that drum, first of all, I don't view it as my job to make bold predictions like that. Second of all, your audience, how do you think your audience ends up so disappointed, so misled when it doesn't come to be? And my second book, really, I wrote my second book right before the Trump indictments landed. So this is 2022-ish. We knew they were coming. We didn't know exactly what they'd be. But if I had to boil down the theme of part of my book, that second book, is you're being told, everybody, that Trump's out of here, he's going to die in prison. It's going to be much harder than you think, and here's why. So I take that responsibility really seriously. The people I've looked up to in this world have always said, you're not going to be any good at this if you don't call it straight. And that's what I've done.
I think at the last time you were on this show, I asked you whether Trump would ever end up going to prison.
I hope I said no.
Your answer, which got a lot of attention at the time because of how I think how much it contradicted what people's assumptions were, was that it just wasn't going to happen. None of these cases were going to be finished by the time the election happened, and if he got reelected, he would toss all of them.
Right.
And so,
a quick story on that. Yeah. I went on The View. Not really. So Alyssa Farah, who's my friend, on The View, picked that last book as one of her books, recommended books or whatever. So she said, "You want to come to the show?" I said, "Yeah." So they sit me right in front, and when they get to the first break, the guy comes over and mics me up. Now, I know what's happening here. They're going to want me to say something. And at one point, there's a clip of this somewhere. Joy Behar turns to me and goes, Elie, is he going to jail or not? Now, I'm in The View. Okay, so there's 300 people behind me. Generally, you know what their political persuasion is, right? And so you can find the clip, but I said something like, definitely not before the election, Joy, and probably not ever. And there was just this I don't know if it's an audible groan behind me, but I could feel it in the room. I know what they wanted to hear, but I'm not, again, I'm not going to pander, and I'm not going to tell people just what they want to hear because they want to hear it.
I know you sometimes get criticism, I think, particularly from people that hate Trump for saying that he has legal grounds to do something, or that he's going to not lose a Supreme Court case.
Right.
What has gotten you the most hate?
Oh, that's a
And
good
has it
one.
ever gotten gnarly?
Yes, and yeah. I think that the 14th Amendment thing really, look, a lot of people were this was the effort to throw him off the ballot because he engaged in insurrection or whatever. I've never said anything other than what he did on and around January 6th was horrible. He should have been prosecuted for it. But there was reasons that was never going to work. And I was alone on an island saying that and getting yelled at.
People can't separate those two.
No, exactly. Right. There's procedural reasons, legal reasons. If you understand the way the law works, it was never going to work. And of course, how did that come out? 9-0, Supreme Court. So even the liberals said that doesn't work. Also, I was critical of Jack Smith, not across the board, but some of the things some of that's in this book. I thought Jack Smith went over the top and overboard with some of the things he did. And there was this code in certain portions of the media that just whatever Jack Smith does is automatically gold. And I was raised as a prosecutor. I was raised, you do things a certain way, not another way. And so that got me, some blowback, but it's fine. I can take it, thick-skinned.
You can. Elie Honig, the book is When You Come at the King. It's brilliant. Pick it up. When does it come out? September 16th?
September 16th.
September 16th. Go buy a copy. Elie, thanks so much for coming on Press Club. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aid.